week because I'm teaching to this enormous class of 200 students.
Wow.
Half of them are online and half are in presence, so it's a big deal actually, but everything's fine. And you?
But I'm good. Everything is good. Weather is becoming a little warmer here now.
Oh, good.
But that's
No, here
not...
it's still windy and a bit gray. I'm in northern Italy, you know, in Verona, so right now. So,
but what are you teaching?
I'm teaching philosophy of law.
Okay.
It's at the second semester of the first year in the School of Law of Padua, which is the second most ancient university, I think, in Italy, surely, and probably the fifth in Europe. We are celebrating the 800 years this year, so
wow.
That's emotional.
You've got history. That's it. And you've kept it. And that's the best part. You've retained your history. That's really something which I think is very good.
And you know, I teach in that building, the original building. So when I enter, you see the columns and all the images of the old professors, and it's history coming really towards you, and that's interesting. And that's in a sense also responsibility, because you are in that.
You're carrying that whole heritage and culture and everything is on you.
Exactly.
And Gabriela is somewhere there, but she wants to keep her camera off. How do you keep your camera off? Okay, for a few minutes. She's saying for a few minutes she needs to keep her camera off. Okay. But I think up till then, Federico, why don't you just tell us about yourself? I mean, what have you been doing? What education, everything?
Well, okay. Something about me. I'm a lawyer, so I studied law at the University of Verona. Then I had this PhD in philosophy of law, which is my passion. That is exactly what I'm also teaching at the University of Padua. But I've been also working as a lawyer and as a mediator, as a civil mediator, which still I am. I'm still doing some mediations, and I'm also a trainer of mediators in Italy. Which is something that belongs to a passion that I have actually. So this is a way to match the professional and the philosophical side of my work. I have met mediation in the US when I was undertaking my postdoctoral research on restorative justice. I went there. I was studying with Howard Zehr, who is the grandfather of restorative justice, as you know. And he suggested that I would not just study there, but take some classes at a school called Summer Peace Building Institute to open my mind and my perspective to the idea of pacifying conflicts. And this was a groundbreaking moment, really, because it changed my attitude to the idea of solving conflicts or transforming conflicts. And so this is what brought me, when I went back to Italy a few months later, to start thinking about mediation in civil matters rather than in penal matters, because it wasn't available at that time in Italy. And so before the reform that was introduced in 2010, I started trying to do some activity towards an idea of mediations as a way to solve disputes through dialogue and through agreements. And still I am there in a sense. So I'm also trying to bring this to my students. We just had a winter school that's called Transforming 21st Century Conflicts with international students. And that was a big surprise.
I'll just interrupt you for a second. Stephan is here. Stephan, that's Federico.
Hello, nice to
meet you.
Stephan is based in Burundi. He has he's Belgian with a Russian background, and many other nationalities will get added to it if he keeps talking about himself. And Federico is in Italy, so he was just telling us about the work that he's doing and how he got into mediation. So yes, Federico, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, please. I was just telling, we had this winter school, international winter school for students from different countries of Europe, but actually we had students from Brazil to India, actually. So there were people waking up at 3 in the morning from Brazil to follow us, and the ones in India that went to bed at 3 in the morning. So because we had the world connected. And strange enough, we had decided way back in October that we would focus on the transformation of conflicts, also studying the situations at the European borders. And exactly during the winter school, we had this situation of war at Eastern Europe. So that was incredible also because we had Polish, Ukrainian, and Russian students joining our classes. So it was a very sad moment, but also a moment in which we could talk together in a way that was not polarizing or adversarial, but also to promote some mutual understanding among students, scholars, and people. So in a sense, I took it as another lesson of mediation. You can also mediate in a cultural way, not just mediate conflicts that are actually taking place. And it can be a sort of lifestyle in a sense. So yeah, this is just to tell you a little bit of what I'm doing. Yeah.
No, it's interesting. He's I mean, of course, you missed out, Stephan, on his earlier introduction. He's teaching.
Yes.
He's teaching philosophy of law in the university.
Okay. And where are you situated? In the north?
Exactly. Now I'm in Verona, but my university is the University of Padua, so it's 1 hour away from here.
Verona, is that the city of Romeo and Juliet?
Verona, yes, it is. It is.
But can you imagine my luck that we are traveling from Milan to Venice and we see Verona there, but we don't stop. I mean, imagine, it was really sad. It was really sad. But sometimes you have to cut out some places. That's the only problem when you're traveling. And you can see it there. You know, this is Verona. But
I think in that period, it must have been very difficult to mediate between those two families, no?
Oh, yes. Yes. And Shakespeare knew something about the Veronese people, because at the time, you know, the Republic of Venice, when they were ruling this whole region, when they had a problem with somebody, they would name this person in charge of the city of Verona. So this person would be dead in 6 months. So, because the people were really a little bit, and still today, you know, there is a trace of that, especially connected with the football matches and so on. And these are people that like to be fighting a little bit, you know. But anyway, there is a culture of mediation in our bar association, I must say this. So we're probably trying to repair a little bit. And you said, Stephan, you're in Botswana?
No, I'm in Central Africa, Burundi. Burundi is a very small country, south to Rwanda, then next to Tanzania, and then Congo, and then the other side of the lake, Tanganyika, you have Zambia. So, but it's really the heart of Africa, and Burundi also has the shape of a heart. That's why it's called the heart of Africa. Yeah.
But Stephan is sitting on a hill. He's looking down into the city and into the lakes, and he's enjoying himself.
But I progressed in life now. I'm in an office in the center of the city of Bujumbura now. But I still have a nice view here, so I need my open space to breathe.
Yeah. And look, Gabriela is there, but I think she needs to keep a video off. She's saying for some time, for some minutes. Gabriela, you're there or you're not there? Are you listening to us? Just say, yes, I'm listening to you. That's all.
Yes, I understand you.
Perfect.
In a few minutes, I'll be on.
No problem. Stephan is just going to tell us about himself. Yes, Stephan, please, because Federico doesn't know you now.
Yeah, so myself, I studied mediation in Belgium, and then from Belgium, I moved to Southern Africa, to Swaziland, South Africa. I studied also mediation in Cape Town University. Then after a while, I moved to Central Africa, to Rwanda, and then now Burundi. And in Burundi, I start to introduce mediation because, as you know, Burundi is one of the countries where is a vicious returning circle of violence. So there was in their culture, there was in the past, before colonization, they had a culture of mediation by elder people that come together in the hills, because it's a country with many hills, different societies on each hills. Also the problem in the past of the ethnic groups, while now you have more conflicts, generational conflicts, I think, between elder people and the youth, and the rich and the poor. So you cannot really say that there is still a lot of ethnic conflict. Of course, it's still there, but it's not the main part of the conflict problem in Burundi. Now, what I do now is, so I contribute to the progress. I try by introducing mediation. But what I do now too, and my focus the last 6 months went to coaching of young people. So I do development coaching, personality coaching, and organizational coaching. And last year I wrote a book on mediation, but this year I finished the book on, hello Gabriela, welcome. And I just am finishing the draft of a new book, Leader Coach. So where I speak about the characteristics of a person to become the leader of your own life, how to lead your life and how to progress in life. Because what I see is that the youth needs really support for a mentality change, to change the society for the future, to come to peace.
Now, Gabriela, of course, is going to come in. She's an interesting person. Every time he'll learn something new about her. Suddenly, I know there is a middle name of hers, which I've never used before. It put out so many posters of hers. Okay, so Gabriela, we're going to use that now. It's going to be Gabriela Assmar. That's the way it's going to be.
Constellation. I decided to include my mother's family.
Oh, good. So, Gabriela, please, Stephan and Federico, you don't know both of them. So please tell them about yourself.
Hello, you all. I'm the representative of diversity in the group. So I am in Brazil. I was born here and did most of the things I did in life here. Brazil is a very interesting country, probably not as interesting as Burundi, but it's kind of the heart of many things. And because it is such a heart, Brazil is very emotional. People in Brazil are very emotional. And I mean, emotions go everywhere, to the good and to the bad, like anything. But so I have been working with mediation for the past 20 years. And it is still an ongoing process, although it's developed a lot. And more recently, I included into my mediation practice another methodology called constellations that came from Germany. I don't know if you heard about the main person who brought it to the world was a man called Bert Hellinger. And as a client to constellation once in my life, it made such a big change in my life. And then during a mediation, I felt the need to help the parties go beyond and understand their environment that is so much bigger than they are, that it's hard for them to rationalize about it. And I had some ideas of starting to use elements of constellation into mediation, and it worked really well. So after that, I got trained as a constellator, and I have been including it more and more and more and more, and it's kind of becoming the main part of my mediations. So the objective is still to help parties get out of a conflict into a better way of coexisting. But the methodology I use is getting more towards constellation, and mediation is just the end. So I do the constellation peace building, which is, and we have data for that in Brazil, which is much more effective. Now, Brazil is the first country on earth that is using constellation inside the judiciary. So we have this kind of indicators. And it's also using constellation into the public health system. So it is also good for inside conflicts that turn into diseases. Of course, it's not a miracle, it's not a magical wand, but it helps people understand the roots of their problems so that they can afterwards look for the right specialty, either a doctor or a lawyer or a mediator, whatever. So, and then the traditional methodology will come as a wrap-up and not as a diagnosis, a complete diagnosis of what caused the problem.
Yeah.
So it gets out of rationality into consciousness and unconsciousness.
Right.
Anyway, that's me.
Yeah, Gabriela and I have had very interesting conversations. They're all lying on YouTube. So, of course, she's spoken elaborately on constellation in that. In the next month, we're doing a constellation, which will not be beamed live. We will record it and then we'll decide whether it has to be put out. But it's Stephan and Federico seems to know about it. Federico knows about constellations, but Stephan doesn't know about it.
No,
So
I don't.
it's a very interesting concept. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand it. So it goes deeper to the person itself.
Stephan, we are going to do this separately. We are going to first. You're going to watch the last episode with her on.
Yeah,
So watch
I noted
that.
it all. I noted it already. Yeah, it's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. So have a look at that. Then maybe the next one we're doing. Maybe you can come past to that. I haven't been able to identify anyone who's going to be doing it actually for whom we're doing it. That I still have to do. Basically, there is a person, and then the constellation concept revolves around that person. So we have to identify that person. So if any of you want to volunteer, I am happy. Okay.
It's good for countries as well.
Yeah. So we can do that. So yeah. But otherwise, you've heard them. Stephan was introducing himself. You heard that while you were there. So have you, Gabriela? Does Stephan have to tell you about himself? Federico, do they need to tell you about themselves? Okay, perfect.
I was on my way to a private place with a computer. So.
Perfect. So basically, Federico is going to start it off by telling us about. Let's start the introduction and then we'll go around. Yes, Federico. Because
hey, so what can I say? We have this interesting connection between dialogue and mediation. So why Socrates? Why did we choose this figure of Socrates? Well, in my view, I just have a few ideas that I would like to share, and maybe also a short presentation, but just a few slides that I will use to share a text. But the idea is that much of mediation has to do with enabling a dialogue, at least in my understanding. And this happens in at least three interconnected meanings, which is a situation of mutual respect and recognition, which is the first base. So it's a dialogue in a broader sense, not just in a communicative sense. Then a second meaning is an openness to project that situation into a communicative interaction. And then the third element is a communication that aims at a reasoned interaction. So in search for reasons, for mutually agreeable reasons. And so this helps us understanding that dialogue is not a duel, is not a competitive situation, I win, you lose, although it may involve some dialectical confrontation as well, but it's not in a competitive way. And Socrates will be an example of that. And also, it is neither a cumulative talk, let's call it like this. So a talk in which opinion just sum up or just set one aside or on the other with no progress in terms of understanding or in terms of knowledge. So in this sense, I also told this to my students last week at the class of philosophy of law. To me, Socrates is a school of dialogue, the figure of Socrates, in two connected ways, at least. On the one hand, for the ethics of dialogue, so the way he shows his attitude to dialogue, and on the other hand, from a methodological point of view, because the way Socrates interacts in those dialogues shows also a methodology for dialogue. And the connection, of course, is good reasoning, good argumentation, searching for reasons, which are some way also at the end, common reasons, exploring also the differences and the possible misunderstandings that may happen between people. But before going to Socrates, how can I say, address the hospitality of Vikram, I chose a brief dialogue that is not placed in Greece, and the main character is not Socrates. It's placed in India, actually, though one of the characters is Greek. And this dialogue took place at least 250 years after the death of Socrates, and I hope I pronounced it well, is in the famous book Milinda Pagna, so which is this Questions of King Milinda, that according to some scholars might be a sort of meeting between Indian wisdom, Buddhist wisdom in India especially, and a Socratic idea of dialogue. And to me, it's a nice example on how to develop an attitude towards dialogue. So if I can share screen, I will just pick up a few slides from that dialogue, and let me just
and Federico is going to elaborate on this in that symposium with both of you are part of that, symposium number 2. So he's going to elaborate on the Buddhism part of it in that.
Yes. And yes, also, who are these two persons that we find in this dialogue? I hope you're seeing the slide. Basically, this dialogue has two main characters. One is this Greek king, King Melinda, or Menander, Menandros in Greek, who was...
Federico, you have to go back. You'll have to go back. You've got to the other slide. You just have to go back.
Let me try to...
You've got to the Greek part of it. You had opened that, but it's gone to the other one.
Okay, let me try again. Is it visible now?
Yeah, but this is the Greeks. This is the Greeks part of it. You opened another slide earlier.
Yes,
which was the
because I wanted to go back on that. Yes, of course. So this is King Menander, who reigned in a very large part of northwestern India and probably what is today Pakistan and a part of southern Afghanistan. So a huge empire that was ruled by a Greek elite who had already developed a very intercultural setting. I will go back on this. But what we know from this dialogue is that King Menander was also, in a sense, a philosopher. This dialogue opens with a very wonderful description of this capital city where Menander was the king, Sagala. We probably think it may be Sialkot in Pakistan nowadays. So a Greek that was far away from his originary land. And it was a city that enabled lots of diversity in terms of cultural, language, ethnical, religious diversity. And it was, as we learn from this dialogue, in a pacified situation. So, and in a very prosperous situation. But notwithstanding with this idea of being in a very wealthy and tranquil at that moment kingdom, King Menander or Milinda was very restless. He was seeking for wise people who could answer his questions and solve his doubts. And of course, being very, very good at dialectics and argumentation, he was never satisfied with the answer. So because he was so able to reply to these people that the answers were never clear or consistent enough. And so he kept going around his kingdom, searching for some people to talk to. And of course, some of his friends and cooperators were, in a sense, trying to find out somebody who was able to solve the doubts of the king. And it is interesting, especially in these moments, when we often find a dissociation between wisdom and politics, that much of his questions dealt also with his personal responsibility as a politician, as a sovereign. And so the power exercised in forms of government, and the questions were, will I be judged for my actions in this life and beyond? What is right and what is wrong? What is my duty as a king? So there is also an ethical and political background. And of course, somebody found the right person to talk to Milinda, and there was this wise man, Nagasena. And it is interesting to see that we have probably a comparison. Also, Alexander the Great had dialogues with Indian wise men, but the style that Alexander had used was kind of, I don't know, not that dialogic. There is this example of Alexander sending one of his soldiers to this wise man, Dandami, and saying, the king calls you to talk. If you will come, he will cover you in gold. If you want, he will cut your head off. And then Dami answered, then he will have to talk with a dead head. You see, it is like the king from an upper position ordering dialogue. This is not what Milinda does. Milinda decides to go and meet Nagasena. So he moves on a chariot with 500 Greeks and goes to Nagasena. So there is a movement, and I'll go back to this. And he doesn't order, he asks Nagasena for his willingness to enter this dialogue. And this is the English version of this dialogue. Revered Nagasena, will you converse with me? This is what the king asks. And Nagasena puts some conditions, in a sense. He says, I will converse you if you will do in the speech of the learned, of the wise man. But if you will converse in the speech of kings, I will not converse. So there is a condition. And of course, Milinda asks, so what is the difference? How do the learned and how? Well, and here's a very important, the Socratic part, as I say. When the learned are conversing, there is a turning over and an unraveling of the subject. Then there is a refutation, an acknowledgement of a mistake. Distinctions and contradictions are drawn, yet thereby they are not angered. It is thus, O king, that the learned converse. Oh, wonderful. And then how do the kings instead converse? When kings are conversing, they approve some matter and order punishment for anyone who disagrees with that matter, saying, inflict a punishment on him. It is thus that kings converse. And promptly, Milinda says, I will converse you as a learned. So, in a sense, he renounces to his role to adopt a situation of mutual, of a horizontal, let's say like this. So there is no king and subdued. We are equal. And in a sense, Milinda was able to ask for this. So it is not a conversation if we don't have this equality. So these are some elements that I would like to share. And then this will lead me back a little bit on Socrates. Just to know, Vikram, how much time do I have?
You have enough time. Stephan and Gabriela are both very patient people.
Okay, no, but I don't want to invade their spaces, but I will try to be.
Stephan, Gabriela, whenever you feel that you've heard too much and you want to say some, please tell us.
Lift up your hand or just tell me, Federico, stop, and I will, or if you have questions or observations, let's make it dialogical.
Basically, if you are drowning in all those words of wisdom, please raise your hand that you are drowning.
My only comment is that we are learned. We are not.
Yes.
Exactly.
They are going to listen like they learned.
Now, I didn't tell you that I used this presentation in 3 different occasions recently. One was at a class of lawyers that were receiving a training in family mediation in a city close to here, eastwards from here. So that was the first time. Then I will use it in my class for my students, but I used it also at this winter school on transforming conflicts. So it is a starting point that has sense still today, in a sense, at least from the feedback I got so far. So just a few remarks. As I said, there is a movement. The king goes. So, and this means that he will leave a safe space, a static position, and gets down his throne. So in a sense, it's abandon your position of power, abandon your safe areas and move. To me, this has much to do with both dialogue and mediation. In a sense, you have to provide safe spaces, but you have to create them together rather than to stay in the previous safe space you were in. And of course, the second moment, it's the voluntariness, because you need from both sides to have a willingness to enter this dialogue. You cannot oblige, you cannot force a dialogue. They will commonly share the will to meet and confront. And of course, you have to verify it sometimes, not to impose your presence or your willingness to confront with someone who doesn't want to do that. And of course, as we said, Nagasena put some conditions, which are not an exercise of power. He didn't say, I am the wise man, I will do it only if you cover me with gold, if you pay me or whatever. It is, if a dialogue is and must be, then we have to verify whether we have a common understanding, whether we would say it in modern language of negotiation or mediation, whether there is a common ground or a playground in which we can understand what dialogue is. So this verification is very important because people often use the word dialogue, but they might not have the very same idea of dialogue. If I turn on the TV and find debates or dialogues that happen nowadays, and 1 month ago the theme was COVID, now the theme is the war in Ukraine, of course, but there is very rarely a true dialogue. There is often cumulative talk or often verbal fighting. So, and they call it dialogue as well. So is there a mutual understanding of what a dialogue embodies? And of course, and Melinda asks, so let's see if we both have a mutual understanding of what dialogue means. And this is interesting. The dialogue is a searching process in a sense, because you have to turn over to unravel the subject. It is not something that is already built, created with no possibility of moving the blocks of the conversation, you know, in a sense. So there is also refutation, acknowledgement of mistake. If you do a mistake, you have to be ready to change your mind and to acknowledge that. So the willingness to risk, in a sense, and the willingness to put yourself into discussion. So and not taking everything for granted. So this means that you can also have to work on distinctions, on contradictions, in a sense, to trace the lines between commonalities and differences, and also to check their soundness. So dialogue implies effort, interaction, reasoning, openness to change one's mind, to put your opinion under the lens of good argumentation, and, which is very important to me, of content evaluation. You cannot just say, this is my opinion and this is the truth, or every opinion is equal, which is a dogmatic or a skeptical attitude. True dialogue means that now we have to confront ourselves. And there is a responsibility. This is the fifth element. And this doesn't mean just because we are asked to respond, although the root, the etymological root, responsibility and responsive is the same, you know. How and what we respond is something we are responsible of, because it affects us, our interlocutor, but also other people. And it is interesting that exactly at the end of this dialogue of the Melinda Pagna, both Melinda and Nagasena are in their places, Melinda at his palace and Nagasena at his place, and they both spend a restless night asking themselves, we know it from Melinda, did I state good questions? Did I talk correctly? Did I put good answers? And only after a lot of thinking, Melinda falls asleep. And they tell this to each other at the end when they finally say goodbye. And I took it as a very interesting example. It is not just that they had this conversation and fine, now we are happy. After the conversation, they were bearing the responsibility of their questions and answers. And in a sense, looking back at that communicative act in a way that is reflective and also, in a sense, self-critical. Okay, I'll stop sharing because this is the point. And any comments or questions? Would you like to add something to make it more dialogical? Or shall I move to Socrates?
Watching, if they have something they can also add. But please, Stephan, Gabriela, anything that Federico has said that you want to add something to?
Yeah, I just have a question. What is the goal of the dialogue?
Oh, yes. Well, the dialogue, it is difficult to say what the goal is. It's basically the core, I would say, of the dialogue is the Buddhist doctrine. So it has become one of the masterpieces of the Pali canon of Buddhism. So there is much of religion in it. And of course, this is probably the reason why this dialogue has been preserved in the Pali and in the Chinese version. Although
okay.
there are scholars who say that there might have been also a Greek version. As far as I understand it, and what makes it interesting to me is the ethical part. So if we take it seriously, Melinda is asking to somebody questions about not only the afterlife, but questions that have an impact on his way of dealing with life, also of dealing with his role of somebody who is in charge of so many people as a king. So there is both a spiritual and religious element, a philosophical, there is something dealing with knowledge, but also something dealing with ethical elements. So all of them connected. And of course, this is the part that interests me more, being a philosopher of law, so more interested in the field of ethics.
Okay, so in a way he's in search in his head if he's right or wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is he in search of what is good?
In a sense, so.
Which is two different things.
Well, both.
Right or wrong are from the mind. It's your mind judging.
Yeah.
While being touches the being, is separate from the mind. And Buddhists, they are not focused on the mind or not on being right or wrong, but being good. So,
being rather than behaving, it's not the same thing.
Yes, so it is important in a discussion or a dialogue to open it up, just to contribute a little bit at this moment. The goal of a dialogue or a discussion cannot be in a way manipulated by the ego to show you are right or to show you are wrong, or to see who is right or to see who is wrong, but to mutually enrich each other by knowledge, by experience, so to learn from each other. And we focus too much by our ego on opposition, while we are all part of a whole. So in a way, when this king is pushing himself to go to other people, to in a way he's trapped by his mind.
It could be. He's a Greek. He's a Greek.
Yes, I understand.
But according to the Buddhist
tradition, I like it. So I want to. You speak of opening up. Yeah.
So there are two versions, because according to the Buddhist tradition, Milinda left his government and became a Buddhist monk. So there is the idea of his conversion. The Western sources tell us instead that Menander died during a campaign while defending his kingdom. So we have both. I think there is a little bit of I wouldn't say a conflict, but an interaction between those two elements that you stretched. I mean, in a sense, being somebody who's in charge of taking decisions, there is an underlying question: are these decisions good or bad? Are there some guidelines to in a sense orient some, how can I say, a compass for my life, also ethical life? But there is also, in the most spiritual part, there is also lots dealing with being. And in a sense, this is not something that a Hellenistic man would not understand, especially if he was influenced by some philosophy of Hellenism. I'm thinking about this Stoicism mostly. So we had also examples of Roman emperors who had been adopting this perspective, and of course, in a sense, acting and being were no longer just in conflicts. There was trying to find a match between a way of life and the decisions he had to take. But of course, in a sense, I think that Melinda himself had a conflict, because also he had to take decisions.
Yes. Gabriela is coming in. Yes, Gabriela, please.
What I found very interesting in the dialogue is that it brings to light the fact that we are most of the time and for eternity, we are learns. Like, how would you say that? The wise. We are people who have to interact with other people. We are interdependent, so we have to build whatever decision we are to take. We have to do it together. And being a king is a position, it's a temporary position, is a title that you can use for specific moments. We are all equal, but the king is differentiated because at some point, in some circumstances in life, a decision needs to be made without the time for dialogue. But normally in all our societies, we mix these two possibilities of being. And when we face a conflict, when we are mediators in front of the parties in a conflict, they're both kings. And that's why they haven't reached dialogue or anything constructive together. So they misplace themselves and then they create conflicts. Because between two kings, there's no dialogue. It's only who's right and wrong, and they both believe they're right, so they act like they're right, and they don't leave space for questions, which comes probably the next chapter here to Socrates.
Exactly. You got it right.
It's wonderful. And it has everything to do with and I say that because the religion that I belong to is Christian, but it's very spiritualized. It's something that also came from France, but it's grown much more in Brazil. And everything we do, it's very philosophical as well. Everything we do is based on the perception that we are eternal spirits. We are temporarily in a body with a persona that help us have some kind of experience to evolve that we wouldn't have otherwise without the urgency of matter. So being in a body that feels hungry, feels cold, and has all the fears derived from these needs is necessary so that we can make it urgent what is important to the soul, to the eternal soul. And then there's a clear parallel to being a king or to being learned.
Yeah, sure.
Only if you realize that the difference between urgency and importance.
Yeah, sure. And I perfectly agree with you when you said when we mediate, we have people who are kings. In a sense, the king is the metaphor for being self-absolute. So you don't have, and in a sense, conflict has a lot to deal with being self-absolutized. Also, violence is a form of self-absolutization, and you treat the other as an object. So that's it. And so dialogue, also in the situation that I said at the beginning of mutuality and respect, means that you have to de-absolutize yourself and rediscover your limitedness and your relatedness, which is basically, you were mentioning the Christian background, which is also my background. Being limited and being relational is at the core of Christian ethics. We say our Father in the prayer because we are brothers and sisters, and there is a Father, so we are not absolutized. So that's also interesting, just to give a very brief example. But Vikram already said that I will go back on this in another meeting, actually. But this leads me also to Socrates. Why? Because, well, you know that we know nothing written from Socrates, because all that we know was from external sources, especially from Plato, one of his pupils, who had Socrates as the main characters of his dialogues. So once again, Socrates is known through dialogues as a member taking part to dialogues or facilitating dialogues as well. So this art of maieutic, Gabriela.
It strikes me how much in common Socrates had with Jesus.
With Jesus.
Jesus.
Including the fact that they were condemned to death despite being innocent.
and only their apostles wrote about what they said.
Yeah. And what is interesting is that just to it's a little bit of a detour, but I will explain the process of Socrates to my students, and it's interesting because his accusers didn't want to go on the trial. They just wanted to promote fear and to stop Socrates from being a public figure. But they said at a certain point, if process has to be, then he has to die. If we have to put his ideas and his figure under judgment, so there will be no mercy in a sense. And it is interesting, if you think of Jesus' process in front of Pontius Pilatus, what is the truth? And in a sense, if you don't think about the truth, it is only an act of power. And so there are many commonalities, but thank you for this. I don't want to, I would talk for hours on this topic, but the commonality is not only that. In a sense, Socrates, of course, it's a different environment, but he was promoting an attitude to religion and to the gods that was not the traditional Greek attitude. So it is quite clear that the mythological way of thinking was probably a good starting point, but not the goal. And what we learn from Socrates is that he said a life without research is not worth the while. And also he was considered the wisest man on earth, although he said that he knew nothing. He knew that he knew nothing. So something he knew, actually, that he was in constant research. And of course, we can, from these dialogues, we can draw something from his attitude to dialogue and to research. And in a sense, this is also religious, but I will leave it aside. That if you know that you don't know, you are not the king, you're not the source of knowledge. There is an absolute that is outside your possibilities. But this doesn't mean to be skeptical, of course. It means to enter an endless and constant research in which the other people that you meet, as he did on the streets every day, can have questions, answers, and perspectives that might enrich you. And as also Stephan said, this is actually a feeling of interconnectedness that is not just cognitive, it affects your way of life. So in a sense, I would say that Socrates embodies both an attitude to dialogue and a method for dialogue. I can say just a few points on the attitude. One, what we see in many of his dialogues is that he had curiosity and he was open to listen. In many dialogues, Socrates asks questions and waits for answers rather than talking and saying things and proposing theories. He listens, and often he says to his interlocutor, well, you are learned into this subject. I will be your pupil, teach me. And of course, at the end, you learn that the person who was pretending or showing some sort of certainties was not knowing that much at all, of course. But he was open to listening. And this listening was an openness that kept being respectful. So what is also interesting, it's the second point, being respectful towards his interlocutor. He never says, what are you doing? What are you saying? This is silly, this is crazy, or whatever. He's never judging the person. But this doesn't prevent his listening to be very, very critical. So, and this is something that, to my view, especially in this moment in Western societies, it shows that respect and critical thinking and critical listening can or even should go together. While if you look at how people often interact, respect sometimes is against being critical, and being critical sometimes is shown in a way that is disruptive, is very violent. It doesn't respect the person. So in theory of negotiation, we know that we have to keep separate the person and the problem, and that's it, you know. So if you make a mistake, it's not you that are wrong. You said something wrong, and I can help you understand that, and you help understand. Also, you help me understand that that is a mistake, but this doesn't qualify you as a wrongdoer in a sense, or as a bad thinker, you know. So. And of course, this means that you must be interested in contents. So you're not just saying everything is fine, every opinion is equal to another. No, no, you have to prove the soundness of your saying, which is an attitude to research. So Socrates is not a relativistic. His enemies, in a sense, were so. The sophists had this attitude to dialogue and communication that was a win-lose situation in which dialogue could be manipulative, could be only for practical reasons, and every weapon was argumentative weapon was in a sense licit if it helped you win. But his attitude was not like that. Solid contents must win. So there is no winner and loser. The truth is the winner if we look for that. Of course, it is not the truth with the big T, but it's the truth that we can outline in that situation according to that peculiar context. And to do so, this is the third element of the ethics. You have to be open to discuss and to be discussed as well. So you are involved in a process where you have to prove your ideas. It's not just enough to say something. You have to provide reasons. And of course, you have to search for reasons. And this leads me to the idea of method, because if you look actually at how Socrates interacts with people, his methodology, that is the way he embodies his attitude to dialogue, there is much in common with what we mediators do. Listening. You never enter a mediation room without being sure that you're open to listening, that you left part of your problems at least out of the room. And it's not easy. I have to remember all the times that I enter a mediation room, am I open to listening? Am I willing to do so? Even with lawyers and parties that probably I would be a little bit displeased to meet, am I open to that? Do they have my whole attention, even though I'm tired or whatever? It's not that automatic. It isn't. And of course, as I said, listening, asking questions, and questions are very important. Socrates asks lots of questions, and this asking questions is not neutral, of course. I can ask a question to somebody or to somebody else. I can ask a question that regards the past, the present, or the future, and this may have a very strong impact on the understanding of a certain situation in mediation as well, Or asking, how do you feel? It is different rather than what is the problem. Of course, if I have a lawyer there, the lawyer will answer. If I am asking, how do you feel? How are you living this situation? I'm enabling their client, the person who is living that problem to say something about his or her own experience, which is choosing what focus, actually. So questions are not neutral at all. And of course, they are very important, along with the need for clarifying through paraphrasing, resuming, and sometimes reframing. And it is interesting because in all these dialogues, the questioning and the paraphrasing that Socrates does helps tracing the borders of questions that were not that clear as they were appearing at the beginning. So understanding the areas of agreement and disagreement, but also checking, for instance, the vagueness of some ideas. Just an example, we all agree that democracy is a nice thing, but probably we would have different ideas of democracies around the world, especially in this moment, or whatever, peace. What is that peace? Can we have peace by peaceful means or also by other means? And then the discussion, or human rights, whatever, they are vague. They have lots of consensus, lots of consent, but they are vague, so they're intrinsically problematic. And so the dialogue, the asking questions, paraphrasing, and checking, challenges vagueness, challenges consistency, and logical soundness, and also challenges explanations. In many dialogues, Socrates says, of course, I am open to your propositions. Of course, you will prove whether they are sound or not. So anytime, and this is a responsibility, anytime we say something, we bear responsibility to give some soundness to what we are saying, especially in a situation in which we are trying to search for some contents that might be solid, as it happens also in a mediation room, because it's not just exchanging opinions. We have to solve or transform a conflict, depends on the situation, you know. So, and I'm moving towards the end of what I'm saying.
But yeah,
just
but,
a quick,
but if you people want to come in at any point of time, just raise your hand, just come in.
But if you want, of course, just do that.
Yeah.
And
Federico, let me also tell you, time is never a factor on my shows. Okay, you can take your time, no problem.
No, thank you, but of course.
But no, you have to answer one question of mine. Whose painting is that at the back? I'm really interested to know whose painting do you have behind you.
It's young Federico, drawn by.
Oh my God!
Yes, my grandmother was a painter, and she had friends, and one of her friends had this picture of me when I was 3 or 4 years old, and so that's me actually. So
but let me tell you, Federico, you don't look like that anymore. All that I can
no,
say.
no, it's not the case of Oscar Wilde and the portrait of Dorian Gray, isn't it? Time runs. That's how we learn that time is running, you know. Okay. Anyway,
Gabriela, Gabriela, we did hear
Gabriela, please.
I knew right away that the picture was yours. So
the eyes are the same, at least.
Because I'm a that is the difference. So, but anyway, I'm delighted. I have nothing to say because I just want to listen.
Okay, thank you. So basically, there is much logic in what I'm saying. You will probably say afterwards, how about feelings, emotions? I will go back to this. Now I'm focusing on the most logical part, but that's also important. Also because I just finished a mediation Wednesday, you know, and we had an agreement. And there was much logic in it, also in looking at the legal part of it, but also in trying to understand. It was about an heritage. So understanding the way people understood their positions, their interests, their needs, and their feelings, and the way they were expressing them into a dialogue. And so this doesn't mean that there was no space for emotions, for feelings, for stories. Of course, when there is an heritage, there is always or often a story like, where were you when I was taking care of our parents? Or, of course I'm getting more because I was the one who was always there and you were going abroad. You were in Germany doing whatever you wanted. I remember a mediation of mine where this man took word and said, yes, I was in Germany. And my children have never had the opportunity to spend a Sunday with their grandparents. I was in Germany because there was no jobs. There were no jobs in southern Italy. And I had to move and I had to leave my family. So I wasn't far away because I wasn't interested. I was forced to move. So you were privileged. You were the one who had a privilege rather than me. So that was interesting because these are two worlds that are not communicating, and they are trying to give value to worth and to economical values, but there are values that cannot be named in terms of economical or property-based things. But of course, how can you be Socratic in this way? Is to help them reframe what they're saying, to paraphrase. So both of you are missing something, isn't it? And both of you had experiences that led to understanding something about your brother or sister in a way. And both of you are probably surprised to learn that you are missing something. Can we try to build a bigger picture? Can we try to put this into a frame that embodies both your arguments, both your points of view, which is, in a sense, paraphrasing, looking at commonalities and differences and trying to understand whether there is a wider frame that embodies those differences in a bigger picture. And that has much to do with logic, although it's not only logic. And this also helps me to say something about the use of logic in the Socratic way of dialogue. So Socrates is great in listening and finding out vagueness and contradictions. I'll give you a couple of examples. One is from the dialogue Euthyphro. Socrates is there because he received the accusation for his process. He is in a place where there is the administration of justice, and he meets this priest, Euthyphro, who is going to move an accusation against his father for a reason that is related to a very vague and problematic case of homicide. But I won't, it is vague, but Euthyphro is very clear. I am sure that I am right, even if all my family is against me. Justice is justice, and I don't care whether this is my father or not. But then he also adds, and in any case, I don't want to lose the favor of the gods. So is he looking for justice, or is he utilitarian, or what? Anyway, Socrates is asking, so I am accused to be disrespectful toward the gods of the city, and you are learned into matters of divinity and religion. So please teach me so I can defend myself. What is being saint? What is sanctity? What does that mean? And Euthyphro explains, it is exactly what I'm doing now. Socrates said, well, I didn't ask you an example. I asked you for a definition. And an example is never a definition. What is food? A food is an apple. It depends. A rotten apple is no longer food. And or a hamburger. But if you're vegetarian, it's not food for you. So it's not that easy. And an example is never a definition. A definition embodies a principle that enables you to understand differences, and is never just a sum of examples. And how many times, as Gabriela said, we have in mediation people who are kings. This is what I'm doing, and I am right. I am the law. And okay, can you explain me at least the reasons behind your position? And often it is hard for parties to find exact reasons or to explain them in a way that makes them understandable to somebody else. And of course, often we have lawyers trying to combine some of these reasons within legal arguments, but not always these are true reasons, in a sense, motivations for that choice of being there, of being in conflict with another person and trying to solve it. And so the issue of contradiction is very important also, vagueness and contradiction. And Socrates is great in outlining contradictions when he's talking to somebody else. So is contradiction important? Yes, it is. And it can be also in mediation. And I have an example from a case of mine. It was a case in which I was the negotiator. It wasn't a mediation. It happened in an apartment store. And there was a sort of fight between two of my neighbors, actually. So it wasn't a professional situation. And they were discussing about the fact that one of them had built something that looked ugly in his own private garden. That was affecting, of course, the facade of the whole building. So the other guy came and said, listen, I just called the administrator and my lawyer. You have 2 hours to destroy that building, or I will sue you immediately. And I will tell you, this happens in my parents' house in the mountains, where people speak only German, because it's in that part of Italy where there is a German minority. So I was the only speaking Italian. So I went there and had to speak German to them. So I had also this kind of bilingual attitude to another language and another culture, which is another culture in a sense. So I went to the neighbor who was so angry and said, listen, can you help me understand what happened? I couldn't, I was there in my own balcony and I noticed what happened. So may I help? Can you help me understand if I'm not disturbing you, of course? And he said, listen, the thing is clear. This is a situation in which we have to agree upon things before we take decisions. This was a unilateral decision to build something instead of asking to the whole property for a permission, because we have to discuss before. So I said, paraphrasing, so you're telling me that we have to discuss before taking decisions, right? Of course, this is my question of principle. Then you will agree to discuss before taking the decision of suing our neighbor. This is a practical contradiction. Of course, if you state that principle, you have to discuss first. If I invite you to discussion and if you want to be coherent or consistent with what you said, you have to do so. That was Socratic in a sense. And he said, okay, you caught me. And of course, I went to the other neighbor, and the big issue was, how can I ask why without asking why? Because in peace building, we learned that the question why is very important. But asking that in mediation is not always a good question, because when you ask why, people feel evaluated and feel you at a higher position because you ask them to justify. So my question was, I'll tell you it in German, was ist wichtig für dich? What is important for you? Which is another way to say why. And said, well, listen, it is important for us for me not to have a fight within this building. Okay, good. Can you tell me what is that thing that you're building? And of course, we understood that it was something that wasn't to be there forever. It was something that he was building for his nephews, and it would have changed maybe positions or whatever. So can we talk about it? Of course we can. Okay, let's do it. It was that Socratic. Of course, I wasn't Socrates. I'm not pretending that I am, but in a sense it was, because clarifying what the issue is, what principles are taking place, and inviting people to dialogue, it is exactly the maieutic for dialogue that we learn from the Socratic dialogues. And of course, there is also another lesson. Some contradictions are more apparent than real. So the idea that every neighbor had, that building is for chicken. That man was living in a farming area, so he will build this thing for chicken. And everybody was thinking about chicken. And I was also thinking about animals, because I have a dog, a big dog. And so my question was, what is our regulation saying about animals? Yes, but a dog is an animal for affection and the chicken are not. It depends if you have, and this was the lawyer mind, you know. And I was looking at regulations, argumentation, what can we say about the dog? Yes, but we are not doing that for business. Okay, then we can talk about it. Right. And of course, nobody had asked what was the purpose of that building that wasn't there for chicken, of course. So there is a presumption, and how many presumption happens also in a mediation. And this is also a very Socratic thing, because Socrates is always asking, what is it in Greek? TST, what is that? Can you clarify? Can you help me trace the borderlines of what we think we know and we don't? And so providing explanations and clarifying things shows that sometimes contradictions are also more apparent than real. The famous example of the orange, the children that wanted to peel the orange and the other wanted the orange juice. If you don't ask about the reason why you want it, you never want, and you maybe cut the orange in two parts and you will have half happy and half sad children rather than two happy children, you know. So this is what Nagasena told to Melinda, unraveling concept and their connection. And this is often, to me, a way to challenge polarizations, which are often one of the biggest problems in human conflict. And also, the legal way of dealing, especially in the Western world, is very polarizing. We are adversarial. We interpret facts in light of norms. So you are either within or without the space of interpretation of that rule. And so it's frequently black or white, here or there, oversimplifying and polarizing. And often in a culture, that oversimplifying creates labels on people. And so turns to, in a sense, change conflict into also a personal way to label and to trace the borderlines of somebody else. And so it's anti-relational in a sense. Yes, so
Stephan,
yeah.
No, I was just checking with Stephan. I'm sure he's thinking of something, not coming in because he feels he'll take it up later, but you'll forget all that, Stephan, all that you wanted to ask.
Yeah, I try to note, just to explain Federico and Gabriela. So I was a litigation lawyer for 27 years in Belgium. So I spent a lot of my life in court. Just till the moment I realized that I don't want to get 70 and tell my children, look, this is where daddy is spending his whole life and be proud of it. So I started to travel the world to meet other cultures. And, when I'm listening to you now about the rules about lawyers, after the 27 years, I started to become a mediator because I wanted to come to solutions, and I was tired of being right many times and sometimes being wrong. And I thought to myself, there must be more to life than this, than to just go and fight in a court and do whatever I can because my client is right, and he's right because I say so. Or because this is the rule, and then there are 50 interpretations of the rule. So, and the cleverest one, he wins the case. That's how the game is played, because in the end, it's a game. It's a game of the mind. And mediation is so beautiful that you have to really try to take distance of your mind as a mediator in the first place. Know your own mind, know your own reactions to the party, know your reactions to the content, and transfer this, and that is the reframing or the rephrasing or the mirroring when a party is talking. Did I understand well? Are you saying this? You're placing a mirror in front of that person, because that person sees what it says by his own mind. And then when you are going to rephrase, it's like it's coming out of another person, and some people at that moment realize, did I really say this? And as a mediator, when there is people in the position of the king, to take them out of their position, the first thing I ask, relaxed, what do you think the other party wants? I don't ask, what do you want? I ask, what do you think the other party wants? That's what is mediation about.
But Stephan, what we're going to do is next 10 minutes we are giving to Gabriela because she has to leave. She's saying she has to leave. This is wrong, okay, Gabriela. No, when you come here, you cannot have these time limits. But she has to catch a flight, she's saying. So 10 minutes are yours. Okay, Gabriela. Yeah, the next 10. Where are you going?
Going to São Paulo. São Paulo is the biggest city in Brazil, and I'll have to give a training.
And she's in Rio. She's in Rio. Yeah, you're in Rio.
Yeah. But I have nothing to, I mean, I'm delighted. I just wanted to stay to absorb more. So
you can, what you can do is watch it while you're whatever traveling. It's all live on. You can also maybe comment from there, or you can just stay on Zoom. What is the problem? Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know that if I disappear, it's not because I'm not liking, it's quite the opposite. So that's all.
But any comments, anything that you want to tell us before you leave, so you can leave something with us to discuss, anything that you want to leave behind in terms of thoughts?
My main probable contribution is I just love the Socratic approach to life, which is quite similar again to what Jesus' mission was, to bring up the light that we all have inside through the notion that we are not only able but responsible for whatever we do with our lives. On the other hand, adding to it, and to what they knew also, there is a limited free will that we can access. many times also conflicts are generated because one party believes that the other party could do something. But there's a huge difference between what you can potentially do, and yes, you can, much more than what you would actually do. So one thing is what you could do, and the other thing is what you actually are able to perform.
That's true.
And these difference, the way to amplify this difference, the way to not amplify the difference, but shorten the difference, so you can bring more of what you theoretically could do to what you actually do, is to enlighten these resources that we all have inside. And questions are one way, but still questions go through the filters of our minds. They are very limited, including ours of the mediator. So, because what we ask is it's about what we see and what we know we don't see. So the trigger to these new chapters of my mediation practice was exactly a case where everything was so logical, and the parties came from a huge difference to one step for an agreement. And they both knew that the agreement was absolutely fundamental for both and for the company that they own together. And if they didn't have an agreement, the company would go bankrupt, and it did. So it was not about logic. The logic was all there. The agreement was written, but they couldn't close it. And so I asked myself for weeks what I didn't see and what I couldn't help them see. And of course, I couldn't help them because I couldn't see. So I started doing the same to me. And I started questioning myself, what else could I have done to go beyond what they could show me, and then help them see what I didn't see. So that's just my humble contribution here.
But anything else you want to leave us with? Yeah, anything else you want to leave us with for Federico and Stephan to elaborate on or discuss? Please, anything that you, any thoughts that you...
I just want to ask a question, because did I understand well that sometimes we have to just accept beyond reasoning or beyond looking for reasons?
There is a huge also difference between the acceptance that we normally use, and the words in English are not directly translatable to what I mean, but it depends on your attitude of acceptance. If you accept with your whole being, you really embrace everything that is, this can always be helpful. But when you accept from a higher standpoint and you say, well, this is not what I think is right, this is not what I want, but what can I do? So let's live with it. There is a, how can I say, a feeling that I am bigger than whatever is being done. This will not help. This is also an acceptance.
Yes.
But there's more to it.
It's the difference between the acceptance by intelligence, which involves reasoning, and, like you said, the acceptance by being, which involves higher consciousness.
And the difference is judgment.
So, exactly, yeah.
When I accept behavior of, well, too bad, but let's go on, there is judgment. And when you just take it for what it is, you're not you are giving up on judgment, and you're just looking at life as it is and dealing with it as it comes.
Yeah.
So then you can deal with almost anything.
Yeah. To just say the last part, because you have to leave, is that sometimes I advise the parties while all the reasons are there, but when the energy is very bad, it's better not to continue, even when reason says so. Because it's better to stay in peace than not to be in peace. Because in the end, the most important energy there is stillness and peace and love.
True.
So, Gabriela, what on the 5th, what are we doing on the 5th? Do we have to find someone for the constellation, or are you planning to do constellation of countries? What is the plan now?
You're the client, so you decide.
Okay. No, you tell me. Can we do a constellation of countries? I'm happy if you do a constellation of countries.
We can do, but we have to find an approach where the people who are there, you or someone else, have some kind of belonging to the case. So, for example, we cannot constellate Russia and Ukraine about the conflict itself if we don't have at least one Russian and one Ukrainian.
So we can do that. We can get one Russian and a Ukrainian. We can get that. That's not a problem.
That would be wonderful.
Perfect.
On
so let's do that.
But we can do a prototype constellation, which is like a general human being belongingness, and then it will not be about the conflict Russia and Ukraine, but it will be about how us as representatives of humankind are being impacted by this war. Then it can be anybody.
Okay, no problem. So I don't know if Stephan, you want to volunteer, Federico, you want to volunteer, please.
Let me think about it. It depends on it is on the 5th of April.
Yes, Federico, you are the one. He's the one. He's
my problem is that, India is always calling me. On that date, I should be doing a presentation to a conference on the history of India about the Indo-Greeks and Greco-Bactrians. So that's probably my big problem. So, but let's write.
It's at 6:30. Yeah, it's at 6:30 India time.
Let me check my agenda and I will tell you, because that's interesting. So I will be curious about that. Also, because as I told you, my connection with the German area, there is much on constellations there. So, I would be interested, Gabriela.
It's interesting because most of the approaches to constellation, not only Bert Hellinger, but all other theories and practices come from Germany. So it's the main are Bert Hellinger, Matthias Varga von Kibet, who is a mathematician, and he developed a wonderful methodology to deal with constellations. And the other one is Franz Rupert, who works with constellation more focused on the trauma.
But Gabriela, let me tell them that if you talk about constellation, she'll say, I'm not going to take the flight. I'm not going to Sao Paulo.
But then if we want to do it with Federico and he cannot on that date, we'll find another date. No problem.
No. We'll do another one with him later on another date.
Another one. Let's just write to each other, and Vikram will be the mediator of all the stuff. But I just wanted to say that it's really interesting. And so
let's do that. Let's do Russia, Ukraine. Let's do that. Let's do that for this one.
One thing before I have to leave. When I mentioned a few minutes ago, about the difference between acceptance and just taking it as it is, it has nothing to do with a passive attitude, quite the opposite. It is an attitude of healthy humbleness to natural laws of life.
It's wisdom.
Yeah, then we can start to build upon it. Instead of fighting for what should have been different, and I would have done better if I was in your place, and so on, and being a king.
Yeah, which is actually, if I may intervene, something that is quite connected to the Socratic ignorance, which is not just accepting that I don't know. It is dialectic, because Because I don't know, I am open to researching. So it is not just accepting a limit. It is, of course, but it also, in a sense, promoting myself towards somewhere else. So the Socratic ignorance is very important for many reasons. One, I go back to what Stephan said. As a lawyer, when I enter a mediation, I want to know the lesser on the legal part of the mediation, because if I do that, the lawyer in me will start judging, evaluating, and taking parts. So that's important, because this ignorance keeps me open to curiosity, to understanding, and also being ignorant, I can state obvious questions which are not obvious at all, because I'm not filtering them through my understanding. So that keeps me open. And of course, the acceptance of limit, as Gabriela said, if you accept your limit, it doesn't mean just that you stay there. You don't possess the truth, but you're in a constant research. And that's also important. And in that research, of course, exploring contradictions, vagueness, and whatever, it is also important for mediations, because you cannot explore agreements if you don't explore also the areas of disagreement. And if you cannot look at commonalities, if you haven't a clear idea of what you're talking about. But the main challenge that I got from both of you,
you have to leave, because
you have to leave.
Have a good flight. Have a good flight. Keep listening
Please.
to it. If you have any questions, comment, just put it on the live chat. We'll take it up.
I will start listening.
Or you can come into the Zoom call from your car also.
Great. Have a safe trip then.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you on the 5th. See you on the 5th, Gabriela. Bye. Yes, Federico. No,
better.
We are doing 5th. We're doing 5th, and we'll do lots. Every month, she's doing at least 2 episodes of something with me. So we'll keep that. Gabriela, you have to come in every month. So don't. Bye. Yeah, Federico, you were saying something.
There is a challenge in both what Stephan and Gabriela said. Is that only a matter of logic? Because, of course, if we take it seriously, I mean, so far there has been lots of logic in what I've been telling. So much of this argumentation and much of this interaction is that very focused on the ability of logically analyzing arguments and their soundness, their borderlines, the distinctions, the commonalities and differences. Yes, in a sense it is so. But I quote from a scholar that has influenced a lot my studies and my practice in mediation, John William Cooley, who wrote on the Socratic method on mediation. And he said, argumentation is the place that is put at the interaction between 3 elements of human experience. One is the pathos, so the element of emotion. One is the ethos, so the element of taking decisions, the ethical side, as we say, and the logos. Of course, when you're looking, especially in those mediations who want to solve a case or transform a case through also an internal regulation, you have to come out with something that is understandable, sustainable, practicable, legal, possible, whatever. So in the end, you have to pass through logic. But this doesn't mean that emotions, feelings, narratives, stories are not important. You have, and argumenting, giving word to these experiences is already a way to enable them to enter some rational explanation without devaluing, forgiving their value, their inner value. So in a sense, if you take dialogue in the broader term, you can also embody those emotional and narrative parts as well. But of course, when you're looking towards a reasoned dialogue, that is necessary to sort out a legal solution, in my opinion, of course, you have to pass through a few rules that enable also experiences to be not just opinions or personal things, but to make them communicative and explainable. So the word logos, which is also not logical, but is binding and creating connections, is also enabling your feelings and your emotions and your lesser logical parts to turn to be not just subjective, but understandable and mutually understandable. Otherwise, it is just, I feel what I feel, and you don't make them, you don't turn them into a possibility of communicating them. And of course, there are many theories you can take from about what makes a dialogue reasonable. So there are these theories of pragma dialectics in Holland, for instance. You have to be reasonable, you have to provide for explanations, I'm quoting for Littleton and Mercer, so you have to contribute in a way that is consistent. So there are many guidelines for a reasoned dialogue. But what I would like to end up with, so I'm going towards the end of my talk, and then we can just really be more dialogical, is 10 principles that I came up with during my winter school, because I was asked from a student of mine this question after the lesson on King Melinda and Socrates. Yes, but if you had to come out with 10 principles on how to create a dialogue, a good dialogue, what would you, it's not 10 commandments, of course, what would you outline? I said, can I answer tomorrow? Because I had time. So let me spend the night asking questions. So what can I answer? And my first answer was, these are not principles in terms of being rules. These are lessons that I have learned so far. And first premise, a principle can never, ever, for philosophical reasons, be translated into a set of rules that is definitive. So if you outline a principle, this principle is always questioning you and the way you embody it in real life anytime from the beginning. So it is never a set of rules. So this is, and these principles are some compasses that belong to my life journey, and that were part of both my philosophical research in a sense, and also as my practice as mediator. So I would like to end up with these, if you like, and yes, and put them into discussion with you, Vikram and Stephan. Point 1, suspend judgment, of course. What we said about ignorance, about being the king or otherwise, suspend judgment. The second point, which is quite connected to what we were saying, be aware of your limitedness, of your context, of your story, of your biases. I mean, when I'm joining a conference, I am European, Middle European, although I'm in Northern Italy. I have my story. I am Christian, I am white, I am middle class, whatever. This is a context. I have my story. And if I'm talking to my friends from the North American native community, they have another story, or especially what Stephan might tell us about Africa and those people and whatever. We have different viewpoints. So we are limited, and this means also contextual. Point number 3, which you all frequently find on the internet, be aware of not knowing what the other person is struggling with. So they have their fights, they have their problems, and you don't know them, and they don't know yours. So don't pretend to know them. Don't assume that you already know them and that they don't have them. Even the people who show very quiet, safe, and whatever, they might have big deals going on, you know. Point number 4, see connections and relations. Focus on them, not just on contents. I said contents are important, but dialogue, it is about connecting between differences. The Greek word is exactly like that. The logos is the connection, and dia means between. So see it at connections and relations. Point number 5, be careful on polarization and labels. This means open to complexity. A larger picture might embody things that in a different way were previously polarized or mutually incompatible. But it's not necessary. Point number 6, I quoted from Oscar Wilde, I guess. When everyone says you are right, stop and think, you may be wrong. Consent is very dangerous, especially for politicians, and I know what I'm saying, especially in these moments, what we're facing in Europe. Consent might prevent you from being critical towards yourself, and consent might also give you the impressions that there is a true agreement. when maybe there is not. So it is nice, but it's problematic. And point 7 is connected. Common opinions or common places are often a good starting point, but often also a bad conclusion, because they are vague. They don't add anything. As I said, we all agree that democracy is wonderful, yes, but what do we think of democracy? What idea of democracy we have? Or as we said, human rights, yeah, of course. Jacques Maritain, when he was taking part to the creation of the list of the human rights at the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, said something like this: we all agree on the list. If we start talking about the implications of those rights, then we will never meet an agreement. So they are just a starting point, never the goal. Point number 8, I got it from one of my mentors, Jean-Paul Lederach, famous father of conflict transformation. Cultivate paradoxal curiosity. Paradoxa, beyond opinions. So challenge common places, challenge common opinions, challenge polarities, try to revert terms. How many times in my mediations I try to recombine things in a different way and show that they can also be other explanations, other possibilities, or turn the inside out. And if it's sensed, then you don't have the only explanation. Or even something that I frequently say when I'm mediating: let's have a look at hidden corners. Is there something we haven't mentioned? Is there something we are not looking on towards? Is there anything because sometimes those hidden corners are exactly what we should look into. Point number 9, whatever, do it with respect. In parentheses, also for yourself. Stephan said it: if you are too tired, if this situation is logically binding, but it's not the right moment also for you, then you also have to stop. You have to know your limit, but also your personal. It happened to me in mediations that I said, listen, this is affecting me. Can we take a break? In very emotional situations. I am not Superman. And I wouldn't work well if I didn't put my limitations and my personal humanity known to others. Of course, you don't do it always if you have some spheres of control on yourself. But respect for others embodies also respect for yourself. So you're not just there to die for the cause of mediation or for dialogue or whatever. I mean, you can do that, but you have to check whether that's an option or not in that situation. And point number 10, which is the final one, I got it from one of my mentors again, Howard Zehr, the great-grandfather or grandfather of restorative justice. He said this in Padua during a conference when he was guest of our university, I think 4 years ago or something like that. And he said, doubt is important, but I prefer wonder. My version is doubt is important, but wonder too. Why? What is the difference between doubt and wonder? Well, we could open an enormous discussion on this about the role of doubt in the Cartesian way of thinking, the modern life, whatever. But if you doubt something, you tend to have a negative attitude in terms of what Stephan said. It's not about the mind, it's about your perspective on things. If you doubt something, you just, say, you're not telling me something that might be right. Let's check. And you can also put yourself in a higher position if you're doubting something. So doubt can be also an attitude that doesn't really open you. Of course, it's critical, but in a sense, you can be open also through wonder, open to surprise, open to the incredible richness of another life, another human being, of a conversation. So wonder is also showing that you don't possess the truth, of course, because if you wonder of something that you hadn't considered, but if you do it with some openness and with some, I don't know if it's childish, but it's more open-hearted, and also heart has an importance. And this idea of wonder comes from somebody who saw wonder as the origin of philosophy. And this was the pupil of Plato. So we go to the second generation of philosophers stemming from Aristotle. So that's it. And so the idea of wonder stems also from the Socratic perspective on philosophy. So this is actually the end of my presentation, but I'm open to suggestion, question, doubts, confutations, or whatever, of course.
Yes, Stephan, something you wanted to comment on that?
Not to comment, just to dialogue. Yeah, I like it. I like to hear like this kind of principles, guidelines, and I use it too when I'm with my students, with my coachees now. So my attention goes a lot to the prevention of conflicts at this moment. So as a mediator, you're in the conflict already, yeah? And I don't know many people who like conflict, yeah? But lately I wrote a text somewhere. My conclusion is we should embrace it. We should embrace conflict. As a lawyer, we were always busy with rules and then judgments. So we are really entrapped in the mind. After analytical thinking, critical thinking about rules, the conclusion was that in a way, rules by itself, just as life, but rules, they are created by us, they are created by our minds. They are bearer of conflict. Why? There is only one law in life that stays the same, and that is that everything is impermanent.
Yep.
So a rule by itself is bearer of conflict by nature. Our mind, if we analyze it, to me it's also bearer of conflict. Outside of my mind, I don't see conflict in humanity, human beings. And this is the connection I want to make now to Socrates, because like you are explaining, he's really the father of questioning, of questions. Not questioning to judge, questioning as a form of curiosity, admitting that you don't know. And the beauty is also to realize and to become conscious of the fact, like he said, you never really know. Yeah. And it's part of your rules. All your rules, they come back to this essence. It's like when you are labeling, it's an agreement. Label, we do categorize. We categorize because we need to learn. So we create definitions, we create categories, which is in a way intelligent. But we also have to be careful that we have to be conscious that it is our mind, our intelligence creating this. So when we as human beings, we create beautiful things, but we are also the creators of conflict where there is no conflict. So you are close to, I think, to the city of Leonardo da Vinci in Vinci, or how far are you from there?
Not really. I don't know how many kilometers. I should check. But Leonardo had a good time in Padova. He designed some channels, water channels, and whatever. So
yes. But what did he do? And if you connect, I'm a fan, by the way, of Leonardo da Vinci.
Wonderful.
Because in my coachings, it is very important the analytical skills. So what we do is to explain youth to be critical in life, because you have to understand in a country like Burundi that is considered by us as underdeveloped, we as Westerns consider it underdeveloped. And I always say, a person is never poor till you tell that person you are poor. So it's also a judgment, because you're going to use criteria by your intelligence to say if you respond to these criteria, then you are poor, and they are created by the human mind. The problem is, of course, that you are in a judgment, and when you are in judgment, you are not in a solution. The problem of our mind is when it is in focus on the problem, it is far away from the problem. So now what happens here is that we are confronted with youth that is ignorant, people that are ignorant, leaders that are ignorant, but there is a difference between conscious ignorance, as Socrates says, is consciously he doesn't know, and then you have the unconscious ignorance. And that is what I see.
That often have power and weapons.
Sorry, Federico, repeat so I can understand.
No, and these often have power and weapons, and that's a big problem.
Yes, exactly. I agree with you. But what is important? They are two. They exist.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is where you have to start from, because if you already start from judgment and not from accepting what is existing, it's already very difficult to come or to return to peace, because you're straight away in conflict before you even try to solve the conflict. But of course, there is a difference between violent conflict, which is the consequence of a very deep conflict, and just conflict that I say you have to embrace conflict in life. Because I think if people would learn to embrace conflict, life would be easier for them, and you would have less suffering. Because if your attitude towards conflict is by our minds negative, we have to be conscious of ourselves, of our negativity towards that conflict. And this is why a mediator is so important, to come to a neutral zone, because both parties, they are in a negative zone at that moment. And we have to stay in a neutral, I don't say positive zone. Why do I say that? Because if we say negative or positive, we are judging.
Yeah, sure. It's already
so we have to go to the neutral zone.
Well, if I can sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. That is just to dialogue a little bit.
No,
I think
I'm
that
very
was the
interested.
essence.
And what I wanted to add I agree with everything you said. The idea of being limited, as Socrates helps us understand, is also saying that conflict is unavoidable. In our structural limitedness, you can always have differences that lead to conflict. What is avoidable is violence. Yeah. So this is also something that I got from philosophy, but I met when I started to learn conflict transformation. So the idea is that conflict is unavoidable, violence is avoidable.
Yes, and so, I agree with you. Yeah.
Which is something, when you said embrace conflict, of course, embrace conflict is also embrace limitedness. But embracing conflict doesn't mean that you justify violence. No, if you embrace conflict, you are saying conflict is a possibility, but violence is not the only way to solve it. And the transformation of conflict into something else is, to my view, is the only justification of law, which is not rules. It is enabling the possibility of embracing a dialogue rather than embracing guns. So this is the only way I philosophically justify the legal world. Otherwise, it is only rules that a power imposes on somebody else. And to give you another hint on this, this is a quote I got still from Conflict Transformation. I take it from John Paul Lederach's The Moral Imagination. And he is telling about a dialogue. He had a brief exchange with, I guess, in Nicaragua, and it's about what you said on being poor unless you don't say. And this made me think that there are different ways of poverty. Also in the Western world, to me, we are spiritually poor. We are poor in the way that we tend to consume our lives without meaning and without good relationships. And this is a way of having poverty. And so I got this reflection when I read these lines in this book. And later I said that there came a man from Nicaragua saying to him, he's American, "Nice watches you have, you know. Too bad that you don't have time." And that's a missile. And
yeah, but
course,
this is very good. I'm in Africa.
Okay,
in Africa, a wise man said to me, "For us Africans, time is eternal. For you, European, time is rational."
And there is an interesting thing about this, because when I read these lines, I said, listen, as a lawyer, I would have replied, how much time do you have? Too bad that you don't have watches. But this brought me to a distinction that came in the Greek world. They had two words for time. One is chronos, which is exactly the time, the rational time. Yeah. And the other is kairos. Kairos is the right moment. And the right moment, you cannot measure it. Yes. And my idea, I conclude my trainings for mediators always with this reflection. We both need watches and time. And this means we need techniques, rules, logic, all the technical sides, and also need real life. If you take one or the other, you miss a part. Because if you only have rules, techniques, technology, whatever, you miss the human part and you're an empty box. Okay. But if you only have experience, feelings, whatever, without the possibility of rationalizing a little bit, of reflecting on them, you're just living life without knowledge of that. So the real challenge to me, and philosophically, but also in the world of mediation, and as a lawyer as well, is trying to put bridges between watches and time. And that's a big issue. But I have to say also that Vikram gave us a lot of time. He was generous and patient.
And you always had lots of time.
I have to stop at 16 hours, but I would like to give you an example. Yesterday in a coaching. So yesterday in a coaching, normally my coaches, they are Africans. And now there was one European lawyer in the group. And she said, and my coaching was about effective meetings. So how do you, I let them participate. What do you think? I do the technique of questioning. The questioning that I use as a mediator, I use it as a coach. So I don't teach them. It's a dialogue of all the participants. So because you have to know that I'm very critical towards the aid sector, the traditional aid sector. And I want to break through some classic traditional behaviors of this sector towards the local people. It's very unhealthy situation and it's still going on.
Because it creates dependence, isn't it?
Yeah, it creates dependence and is disrespectful to the being of the other person. Because everybody is born with his own value. Every person is valuable. So everybody has values, is created beyond our judgment. Everybody is created the way he is or she is. So that's why I coach those people. So it was about effective meetings, and we come to the value of time.
Okay, now please. So I was just saying something that there was a question that I wanted to put across. There was someone put a question in the chat. Stephan, you were saying something after that.
Sorry, the value of time. And in a Western world, so the lawyer is speaking, and she said, do you know, we have to start in time. Do you know how much we bill as a lawyer? And if you come 5 minutes late, it costs you. And myself, because I live many cultures, listen, I live many cultures. I don't know many cultures. I live them. So my African soul, my African spirit was laughing, and I laughed. And the Africans, they know me that I can be, they know me that I can take another position and another being because I'm the whole of those people. And I say, you have to understand that people who don't even have a job, the value of their time is maybe more worth than your time, but in a way, everybody's time is equal. The value of everybody's time is equal. And the person didn't get it, but it was a good thing for the person to reflect. If you want to come from Europe to Africa, then you have to know that you cannot come here with your own perceptions, even not of time or values. Because we go from the individual, they go from the relationship, from the Ubuntu. Yeah, exactly. So it was beautiful, and I just wanted to share that with you. It's really amazing to live this with the people and to take. It
opens your mind.
Yes, unbelievable. It's the beauty of experiences, to experience and to stay open for other experiences. And I must say, it costed me a lot of time to understand and to be in that way.
But it is like that, you know. I had a similar experience because I often go to visit my parents. I took, before the COVID, there was this train, the Austrian trains from Verona to Brixen. And of course, you can either meet an Austrian personnel or Italian. And in this case, there were two of them checking my ticket. And in those trains, it's different like Italian trains. You don't buy the ticket before, you buy it on the train. So I said, I got in Verona and I'm going out in Brixen. And of course, the Italian trainee said, what if he said that he jumped in afterwards, he would pay less? And of course, the Austrian controller said, yeah, but why should he say that he jumped in later if he comes from Verona? And of course, they both look at me. And of course, my Austrian part was thinking, of course, and the Italian part was laughing as well, because both were saying that the other was stupid for completely different reasons. And of course, you would never have an Italian train in which you say where you just jumped in, because it wouldn't work. But in Austria, it works. And so you have to be open to both mentalities.
Okay, true. Yeah.
Okay, but let me tell you now that you were saying now we have people from Brazil to Thailand. Okay, so we have a range from not just India, now we have Vietnam, Thailand also. But there is a question from Stephan. She's in Kashmir in India. She says, is doubt a cynical attitude or a constructive block towards building consensus and resolving conflict? Is there any rule, or is it just instinct to resolve conflict? Yes, Federico and then Stephan, whoever wants to take it first.
Okay. Can I see that question? Where can I see
if you go to LinkedIn, if you go to LinkedIn, just go to LinkedIn Live, and the question is there.
LinkedIn Live, I don't have it. Let me
let me put it in the I'll put it in the chat.
Place it in the.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, let me just copy it from here. But
thanks. So then we will see the recording on LinkedIn, isn't it?
Yeah, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere.
Wonderful.
Now let me just put this question. Okay. Now let me put it in the chat. And yes. I hope Stephan is still there. Stephan, are you still there? Just put a message in the chat.
Yes, I see it. I'm reading it.
I was checking with Stephan. She's the one who asked the question. I'm just checking she's there or not. Because although she has put a comment right now, connecting rationale and philosophy. Fruitful discussion. Yes, Stephan.
3 questions. Please, Stephan.
So it's about your doubt, Federico. So
I guess I have to answer. Well,
yes, you have to answer.
No, but I can also, because there are many aspects to the questions here.
Yeah.
Is
Both
there
of you
any
have to answer
rule,
it.
or is just instinct to resolve conflict?
These are two questions, actually.
Yeah, exactly. So the second one is the process. So it's not about rule, it's not about instinct, but it is like a process that you follow. Maybe Vikram could react to that, to the second question, but because sometimes he's close to instinct. He always says everything is already in you. So I don't know if it's my instinct, my heart, my brains, my spirit, my intelligence.
It's the quantum computer. It's got everything there. It's the output that has to come out instinctively.
Well, to be honest, for instance, if I had to say something, when I'm training mediators, I often say that I feel things on my mustache. So like the cats or dogs or whatever, it frequently happens to me in a mediation that I have a feeling. So there is instinct. Yes, but if you trust the process, and if you're trained not, so instinct, it is just an argument. It is never a rule. So if you're open also to doubt and to doubt your feelings, you can just give a hint or give a chance to that feeling, but you have to consider it critically. And if you, as Stephan said also, if you approach not just with your mind things, but you approach them with a whole perspective, it might happen that what you call instinct is, in a sense, something that you still haven't rationalized, but the principle of that are already inside you. So it's just about wording it or giving light to that. Of course, I would also say something that might be contradictory. Trust your instincts, but never let them rule. So
yes. Yeah, instinct, you can say it's a part of your subconsciousness, maybe, psychologically. But on the other hand, like you say, if you master, is it the different stages of savoir, savoir-faire, et savoir-être, in French they say. It means that when you learn a skill, like for example as a mediator, mediation, to mediate, you can consider it as a skill, yeah? When you master the process so well by experience, by practice, by knowledge, of course, you start with knowledge, but practice to me is the most important part, because then you come to mastery, which is the highest level of exercising a skill. And the mastery is the capability of doing something unconsciously, but in the good way, because you became a master in it. In that way, it can feel like instinct in the end. For example, in life, when you have many experiences, it is your subconsciousness one moment that will say, that feels like an instinct, this is not good, because through my experiences, I know this is not okay. So you have primitive instinct, and you have, I'm not a psychologist, but I think a lot about all these perspectives. And this is the way I see it. You have different perspectives on instinct. The instinct that I see here is mastery. It sounds instinct. The problem is for us that we judge also instinct as something negative, like animal. But in the end, we are animals, and we are created with instinct. What I see is that as humans, we can influence that instinct. We can create our own instinct.
Because Federico doesn't know, but Federico, what I keep saying is that you've got this quantum computer. Everything is all there. Now, what happens is it gives you an output. Like right now, it's giving me an output to say this. Now, if I filter that through something which is much, much narrower, before it comes out of my mouth, to be able to say that my calculator can calculate what the quantum computer gave as an output, that is what I'm saying. Remove that barrier. Let it come out. There is some reason for it to come out, because there is so much stored and it is processing and everything. So that's, you can call it instinct, or you can just call it an output which has looked at a lot of factors. And that's why the output came out. But in that moment, if you think that I can look at that output and start recalculating it through a calculator, it's not going to happen. So that's why let it flow. So I just let it flow. Whatever comes out, let it go out. What comes in, let it come in. It's all a channel which is open on both sides. That's how it is, Federico. That's what Stephan is referring to, because I keep saying this a lot of times.
Yeah, that makes sense. If I may, I was taking a little bit of time to answer the first question, which is a very interesting question and a big one. I might try to say something like this. It depends. I would distinguish between the philosophical role of doubt and the relational use of doubt. So, philosophically speaking, doubt is important not to take things for granted. So it is, in a sense, the mother and the father of your research. Yeah. There is a very interesting quote from Pope Benedict when he was a theologian, Joseph Ratzinger. He said, you cannot understand faith if you don't have doubts, because if you don't feel, if you're not at the edge of doubts, if you don't feel the enormous doubts, you just believe something that you don't put into question, which is not faith. It is just believing something without any reason, which is incredible. I mean, a pope saying that doubt is important to understand faith. But also philosophically, I would say that doubt is important because you don't take things for granted. Also, your things. It is a sort of safeguard rule in checking what you think, what you say, whatever. So in this case, being doubtful is not being cynical. It is being conscious of your limitedness and of the fact that you have to ask and provide reasons. Okay. But when I was provoking before, there is also a relational use of doubt that can be cynical. If you put yourself, for instance, and you see it in mediation from some parts, well, I can question this, or I'm not sure you're telling me the truth. Well, I doubt that you really have the strength to explain this in front of a judge. So if you think of these expressions that I frequently met at a mediation table, this is not doubt as a suspension of judgment. This is doubt as a judgment that is trying to undermine your interlocutor. So this is a relational use of doubt as a sort of role-playing game in which you put yourself in an upper position. So that would be cynical. I don't know if I answered your question, but of course, the same things can change according to the way you think of them and the way you use them.
Yeah. Okay, so her comment after that is, after she's heard you saying, absolutely,
Vikram, I wanted to add something because Federico I agree with him, what he says, because you need doubt to come to solution. You need questioning. Questioning is doubting. It's part of the whole process. The only thing that maybe I'm trying to look behind the question is that doubt shouldn't influence trust. So, because this is a question that also is related, and I came to that, Federico, because you said there is the relationship part also. And as a mediator, it is important that when there is doubt, that you try to address this doubt, with whatever doubt it is, about the parties, about the subject, to address it, so that, because in a way it's a process to try to come to trust again also. Peace enforces trust. So, and when there is conflict, there is a problem of trust also. So, so as long as this doubt, that you don't doubt too much not to come to trust anymore.
But the problem is, now I realize we should not have answered a question, because now she says, thanks, Vikram. Otherwise, in private messages, she says, Vikram Bhai. Bhai means brother, Federico. Stephan. Say brother. So now she hasn't used that in that. So, Stephan, why have you not put Bhai in the public comments? She's not putting that. But that's why we should not have answered a question. But okay, not a problem. Okay. She'll put it after that. So I think because I think people have the nice comments which have come up, and let's look at something. So what was that? I really liked one comment saying that this is one of the best ones I've watched and all. So I'm happy about that. So I mean, generally there be people from all over, so everyone has had some comments or the other. But it was very nice. Thank you very much, both of you. Now what is happening is that symposium number 2, both of you are also there in that. So there, that heart, soul, and spirituality. I've asked people to come if there are more speakers who want to come in. So please, they can also come in. And what I really always do is also take people through what has happened in March and what's coming up. So both of you have to have a little bit of patience there to watch that. Are you okay with that?
So
Please tell me
next
that
week.
Yeah, but just give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second, Stephan. I just like to do this because there is so much that happens in a month that people don't end up getting to know what's happened. Although they can always go to the YouTube channel and watch it, but they don't get to know there is a little too much, Federico, that happens every month. So let me just take you for this, what is happening in March. And Federico doesn't know a lot of shows that I do. So Mediator Experiences is a show where mediators talk about their memorable experiences. So there is a Weinstein Jams International Fellowship. So I'm covering them right now. So this is number 22 in that series. So there are lots of series happening. So Hajit was from Israel. Then Gabriela, you just met. So this is part 2 of Under Heart, Soul, and Spirituality. We're having discussions. So this is part 2 of that. We've had a conversation. There's a show called In Conversation with a Beautiful Mind. Stephan started that. His was the first episode of that. So she was on that also. You can watch those. And Stephan's episode also you can watch on YouTube. On mediatorvikram.com, you will find an index of these shows. So you can click there. You can get to know about Stephan, his LinkedIn profile, and other people, and the YouTube link to watch that. So all that is there. Then we have this, which happened. We're celebrating Women's Day. So this is part of, okay, I haven't told you about this Mediation Vision 2026 I've put out, asking people to discuss things in terms of their vision for 2026 for the evolution of mediation and mediators. So one of the topics is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this was discussion on women and mediation. So we had all these people there. Okay, there was I mean, about 25 women from about 15 countries. So it was an interesting, but obviously everyone didn't get too much time because obviously out of these, it went on for about 3 hours. So everyone got a little bit of time. So what I'm doing is now having individual discussions with them. So Sarah's coming up, and you'll see that later. Sarah and Andrea are coming up, and I'll ask these other women also to come have an individual discussion. This was again part of that Vision 2026, mediators, mediation, and global problem solving. So Ken Cloak spoke about, of course, in the background of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So that was interesting. So this is all available on the YouTube channel. And then this is that series that I'm talking about, In Conversation with Beautiful Mind. So this is number 37, Anna Sambol, the wonderful conversations. So then this is online mediation is one. Alberto's doing a lot of work in terms of ODR in Latin America. And if you watch this, he'll tell you that for the last 20 years, he's been talking about things which people are kind of understanding now. But you must watch it. And all the thoughts that he had, he's spoken about it. You must watch this. I mean, imagine someone had that vision. What he says is, I'm crazy. And he says, Vikram, you're also crazy. So you also.
You could also call it the crazy mind, not the beautiful mind, because they are both judgments.
That's very interesting. I'm doing In Conversation with Crazy Minds. Good idea. So this happened yesterday. This is what we have done today. So then this is that In Conversation. She's from Kyrgyzstan. She's got us tomorrow. Then we have, like I just told you, Sarah's coming under that Women and Mediation, that discussion. Then Mahatma Gandhi and mediation. I asked, Stephan is coming in that. I asked Federico also. Federico, that is when Socrates and mediation came up. He said, look, Mahatma Gandhi and mediation, I might not have too much to talk about, but I can talk about Socrates and mediation. That is how this topic came up. Then we have, again, like I told you, Andrea is coming on that, Women and Mediation. Then this is that other series I do called Evolution of a Mediator. The whole concept behind this was that people say they can make mediators in a training or whatever. I'm saying there is so much that goes into a person and the person evolves as a mediator. There's a seed there which evolves as you go along. So I take people through their own past, but also into their families, their parents growing up, even their grandparents, because that is the value system and everything that they bring with them. So what has happened is we already have 2 episodes. Up till now, Bernie has not come into the scene, into the world. We are right. We were last one. We were talking about his mother growing up and what was happening in terms in Germany, because it was in the background of what was happening with the Jews and the persecution. So what she was going through, all that. So now in this episode, he's going to come into the world. So I'm just trying to say that there is so much about a person which makes him what he are, what him or her, whoever, makes them who they are. It's not about making a mediator in a 40-hour factory, which is what I have a problem with. And then we have the series called Talking Books, because some of us don't read them, like me. So we discuss books. And she's done, this will be interesting, Federico, Stephan. Both of you can be part of this.
Yeah.
About formulating and asking
29.
questions.
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, so please, and she wants to do a kind of workshop with it. So please come for this. It'll be interesting. So this is about questions. And then on the last day of the month, to celebrate the birthdays of mediators in that month. So that's about what a month does. And then I've opened out a call for speakers for the symposium number 2, Heart, Soul, Spirituality and Mediation. So anyone wants to be part of it, please send me a message. And that is what it is all about. So thank you very much.
What an intense program. Wonderful. Really compliments and congratulations on that. Really.
Federico, and you know what is very strange is that I think I know Vikram for 1 year now, and he has this program, The Evolution of Mediator, and then the universal law that everything is always an evolution. And my question is, I don't see Vikram change. I don't see any
He's
change.
not evolving. He's not evolving.
It's an internal change.
Right. Like, Federico, that's the answer I would have given. I mean, he's given it better than what I would give. Exactly.
And because your soul is always fresh, also your body remains young. And this is another very...
Wow, this is what I needed to hear. That's what I needed to hear.
Very good. Thank you, Vikram.
Okay. But let me also tell you that I've been saying that let's reach out to more people. So I said I put together 1,000 people with the mediator mindset, and they reach out to more people. They do the same thing that I do, have shows, have conversations. So what Lisa has been quite regular in whatever I've been doing. Today she's starting a series, and she's called me as the first person on that. She's called Ordinary People, Extraordinary Voices. So that starts in another 14 minutes. So of course, if you people want to come for that, you please drop in. But that's something which I was very happy that she's taken up. And when people start talking about whatever it might be called, having these conversations around mediation or with people, I think a lot of thoughts come out and people get inspired. I'm very surprised. I get messages from all over the world, and I don't even know, because look, who's watching, I don't know. People watch recordings and someone says, I saw that and I really, maybe click with this, or I agree with this. I want to do this. I just feel really happy. That's what gives me the satisfaction. So That's how it is.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, both of you, for coming in. And I'm seeing you in the symposium. And of course, Stephan, I'm seeing you on the Mahatma Gandhi and mediation.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Federico.
Nice to meet you, Stephan. And I'm looking forward to future occasions, of course.
And Federico, both of you should connect on LinkedIn, because both you look at the LinkedIn post, both your profiles are there. I'll also put out a post again for this. So
yes, I will share this on LinkedIn. So if that's okay by you, this creates network, of course.
What I will do is I put out a post with this video, and then you can share that. That's what I've been telling people. Please share. That's how we will reach people.
And of course, I will. That's a wonderful idea.
Let me tell you, Federico. In August and September, I did a symposium with almost 100 speakers from more than 40 countries. Okay, so this was, according to the topic was mediation in our culture and traditions. I kept saying that all those 100 shared each other's session, not anyone else, only they. We would have, can you imagine the number of shares? Based on that, how many people we could have reached? But for some reason, people don't share. That's something I have to be able to find out why. How do we get over that? Like you just mentioned, you just immediately said, I'll share. That's what
sometimes it's just being lazy, or just you forget, you know, you should do it exactly in this moment, then you just get into the river of life. But I promise that I will I take notes now. Share Vikram's video.
Yes. What you do is on LinkedIn, it's already live right now. That post is already there. You can share it immediately if you want.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So okay. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
It was really nice talking to you, and thank you for hosting me in this very nice conversation.
No, it was very nice of both of you to come in. It's always enjoyable talking to Stephan, and of course today to talking to you. It's really nice, and we're going to continue these conversations and have some interesting.
Let's keep in touch. Of course, through LinkedIn we can share contacts, ideas, views. And Stephan, if you want also to share what you wrote, what you mentioned, please do, and I would be pleased to read it.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much.
See you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
And
bye.